We are here in the matter of State of Arizona versus Hunter Blair Stanfield. Mr. Stanfield, can you tell me your full and correct legal name?
Hunter Blair Stanfield.
And what is your date of birth?
2004.
Thank you.
The objection is regarding the separation of powers doctrine. Judge, I think that the legislature in this case has overstepped its bounds and handcuffed this court from considering all the what I would consider pretty substantive mitigation that's even come from the side of the state's case prior to today. I understand minimums and maximums and mandatory minimums even, but
Mr. Collins, would you like to respond to that argument?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. So the argument is noted, denies that argument or rejects that argument. Certainly the issue is preserved for appeal.
Gail is my mother and Chase is my stepfather. Since October of 2022, I have struggled with anxiety and panic attacks that are triggered when I cannot get a hold of the people I love. Every day is hard. My mom was my best friend. She was my person that I could call and lean on no matter what it was. As a mom, I want to protect my children, comfort them when they're sad, listen when they're angry, but this wound I can't fix with a Band-Aid and a kiss. Competed in her first Arizona State cross-country race. When she crossed the finish line, she was so happy and proud of herself. But later that evening, she cried because she couldn't share that moment with two of the most important people in her life. I have 2 voicemails that I'm grateful that I saved just to hear them say, "I love you." I have a sweater of my mom's that I keep safe because it still smells like her. I want justice for Gail and Chase. It will give myself and our families the first step towards healing. It won't bring them back. Like a shattered glass, we can pick up the pieces and glue it back together, but it will never be the same.
Chase was my son, Hunter's my grandson. Hunter, you've broken my heart and taken so much from me. There's an emptiness that I feel that will always be there. I'll never again get a big bear hug from my son. I'll never get that out of the blue, unexpected phone call from him just because he was thinking about me, or to ask me the name of a flower or a plant that he might want to get for Gail. I'll never get to go for a walk or sit and just have coffee with him. I'll never get a text or a phone call from my daughter-in-law asking for my advice on something, or to get my recipe for one of Chase's favorite dishes, or to tell me about a hike that they had taken and what they had seen. But also, Hunter Blair, you've taken yourself from me. I'll never get to see you become a husband or a father. You won't be with us for Christmases or family gatherings. In Ephesians, it says to forgive one another as God forgave you. I've thought a lot and prayed about this, and I feel that I need to forgive you. But Hunter, I do forgive you. And I pray that you can be honest about what you've done and seek out God's forgiveness for you.
This is kind of a unique situation in the law, and in Gila County we don't have many homicides, and anyone that has suffered loss understands the pain associated with it. So the court's got to consider today whether to run consecutive or concurrent. And the only comment I'd make on that, Your Honor, is the verdict has to matter. I'm a little aghast at some of the comments made in the pre-sentence report by the defendant and the position he takes. Absolutely zero remorse. Maybe he maintains his innocence. I don't know. This is not a situation where his life was being threatened or that he needed to defend himself. Chase traveled more than 4 hours from Phoenix to kill his parents. Hunter. not Chase. This was not a spur of the moment. This was clearly planned. And he can be angry at his parents for whatever abuse he believes that were thrust upon him. There's actually no evidence of any of that. Oddly enough, he had two sets of grandparents that would step in and take care of him. We have the letter from his grandmother, who expresses remorse for maybe not having taken him back to possibly prevent this. I'll maybe try to give her a bit of comfort. We don't have control over intentional acts of others. And playing the I should have done game does not make anyone feel better. But we had grandparents that would have stepped in. The testimony from the witness stand during trial was that Janine and George were essentially financially supporting Hunter. They probably would have listened to him had he come to them with abuse. They probably would have helped him. That would have been a much better solution than ambushing his parents late one evening because of some perceived past abuses. Ultimately, Your Honor, we'd ask that the court run these sentences consecutive because the verdicts have to matter.
But Hunter's still a young man. He was born the same year I graduated from high school. And we don't have here a repeat offender or somebody that was in high school and was ever even remotely stopped for a traffic ticket. His mother certainly was not in his life. That his father, may he rest in peace, was in and out of his life, certainly when he was very young. There was really only so much that he could bear because, number one, of his age, number two, what we've seen in the letters that mention his character and his childhood, and then number three, if the court will be patient enough with me to let me switch back to the law, is that if in 20 or 30 years my preservation of error is sustained, then he might get to be resentenced, and I would like his sentences not to be stacked. So the defense rests.
You get to have the last word before you are sentenced. Is there anything you'd like to say?
No, I'm good.
Okay. The defendant, of course, gave his birth date today for identification purposes. The significance of that, if a person commits first-degree murder and they are not 18 years of age, then they actually do have, depending on the age of the victim, they have a possibility of being released after serving either 25 or 35 years in prison. Everybody kind of scratches their head and says, well, why? Why did this happen? And I don't know that we'll have answers to why this happened, although much of the defendant's preparation for each murder was the same. In other words, he concocted a plan. The evidence suggests he concocted a plan while he was at college. He still committed separate acts to kill two people, two victims. He shot several times, and I believe it certainly was multiple gunshots in each victim, but I believe it was 3 gunshots to each victim. The other thing that I'll find is the defendant took advantage of the trust that he had established with his father and with his stepmother as a family member. I'm going to find that the defendant got the murder weapon from his nearby grandfather's house. That action of actually using his grandfather's gun and then replacing it where he got it, it's conceivable that that action could have caused his grandfather to be a suspect in a double homicide case. Although the defendant was not charged with theft of his stepmother's Jeep, the evidence in this case leads to the conclusion that he stole his stepmother's Jeep after murder.
The sentencing hearing in the case of the state of Arizona versus Hunter Blair, Stanfield centered on the punishment for the murders of his father, Chase, and his stepmother, Gail. At the beginning of the proceeding, the court confirmed the defendant's full legal name and date of birth, establishing that he was born in 2004 and was under 18 at the time of the offense. Defense counsel raised an objection based on the separation of powers doctrine, arguing that the legislature had overstepped by restricting the court's discretion and effectively preventing the judge from fully considering substantial mitigation that had come out during the case, including information acknowledged even by the state. Counsel recognized that mandatory minimums and statutory sentencing structures exist, but maintained that the court had been handcuffed from weighing all of the mitigating evidence in a meaningful way. When invited to respond, the prosecutor declined, and the judge formally rejected the defense argument while noting that the issue was preserved for appeal. That procedural exchange set the stage for a sentencing hearing that was deeply emotional, shaped by the devastating impact of the crimes on the victim's family, and focused on the question of whether the 2 life sentences should run concurrently or consecutively. The court then heard from family members whose lives had been permanently altered by the murders. One statement came from a daughter who explained that Gail was her mother and Chase her stepfather. She described how, since October 2022, she had struggled daily with anxiety and panic attacks that were triggered when she could not get in touch with the people she loved, a direct result of the trauma and fear left behind by the killings. She spoke of her mother not simply as a parent, but as her best friend, the person she could call for anything, the person she leaned on no matter what she was going through. She described the pain of being a mother herself while carrying a wound she could not fix, saying that as a mom she wanted to protect her children, comfort them when they were sad, and listen when they were angry, yet this loss was too great for a simple remedy. She shared a particularly heartbreaking memory involving her daughter's first Arizona State cross-country race. When the girl crossed the finish line, she was excited and proud, but later that night she cried because she could not share that moment with 2 of the most important people in her life. That detail captured the ongoing nature of the loss. Milestones still happen, but the people who should be there are gone. The speaker said she kept 2 saved voicemails just so she could still hear Gail and Chase say, "I love you," and she treasured one of her mother's sweaters because it still carried her scent. She told the court she wanted justice for Gail and Chase, not because any sentence would bring them back, but because justice would be a first step toward healing for both families. She compared the family to shattered glass, explaining that although broken pieces can be picked up and glued back together, the result can never be the same as before. Another statement came from Chase's mother, who described the layers of grief the crime had created. She said Chase was her son, and Hunter was her grandson, and that Hunter had broken her heart and taken so much from her. She spoke of a permanent emptiness that would always remain because she would never again receive one of her son's big bear hugs, never get one of his unexpected phone calls just because he'd been thinking about her, and never again hear him ask the name of flower or plant he wanted to get for Gail. She mourned all the ordinary moments that had been stolen from her. No more walks, no more coffee together, no more texts or calls from her daughter-in-law asking for advice, recipes, or sharing stories about hikes and things they had seen. But she also addressed the loss of Hunter himself, saying that by committing these murders he had taken himself away from the family as well. She would never get to see him become a husband or a father, and he would not be present for Christmases or family gatherings. Despite all of that pain, she turned to her Christian faith and referenced command in Ephesians to forgive one another as God forgave. She said she had thought and prayed deeply about it and believed she needed to forgive him. She told Hunter directly that she did forgive him, and she prayed that he would be honest about what he had done and seek God's forgiveness as well. Her statement did not erase the horror of the crime, but added a layer of tragic complexity. The defendant had not only murdered 2 loved ones, he had also destroyed his own future and severed himself from the family that still, in some measure, loved him. The prosecutor then addressed the court and framed the case as unusual for Gila County because the county does not often see homicide cases, though he acknowledged that anyone who has suffered a serious loss understands the depth of the pain involved. He focused the court's attention on the key sentencing issue, whether the 2 murder sentences should run consecutively or concurrently. His central point was that the verdict had to matter. He said he was aghast at some of the comments attributed to the defendant in the pre-sentence report and at the position the defendant seemed to be taking, describing it as showing absolutely zero remorse. He suggested that perhaps the defendant was still maintaining his innocence, though he did not know. The prosecutor rejected any implication that the killings were an act of self-defense or a response to an immediate threat. He emphasized that this was not a spur-of-the-moment killing, but a planned double murder. Correcting himself after a slip of the tongue, he stated that Hunter had traveled more than 4 hours from Phoenix to kill his parents, underscoring the amount of time and distance involved and the opportunity the defendant had to stop himself. Even if Hunter was angry about what he believed to be abuse, the prosecutor argued there was actually no evidence to support such claims.